All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'm very excited about our guest today. We are talking with Sarah from a wonderful operation and organization called TrialReach. And today we are going to be learning more about what I like to think of as the human side of clinical trials. And Sarah, would you maybe do us the pleasure of telling us a little bit more about you and who you are and your role there at TrialReach, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what TrialReach is all about.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Really nice to be here. So I'm in London. My name is Sarah, and I work, as Scott mentioned, for a company called TrialReach. And TrialReach is set about with the mission of making it much easier for patients to find and understand and take part in clinical trials. And my role is, my title is Chief Growth Officer, but what I really do is work extensively with patients and patient communities. Um, to understand what they need in terms of information about clinical trials, how we can best help them, and how we can solve some really fundamental problems, such as awareness about medical research, the importance of it, how we take part, what the opportunities are to take part, and what it means when we work together to really advance medical science, because it's such an interesting time in terms of medical research for many disease areas, and it doesn't happen without us. So, and to date, it's been very difficult to access that information, through sites like clinicaltrials.gov. So we set about, we come from, I have to explain the background, but I work for this incredible man called Pablo Greiva, who's Argentinian, and his passion was medicine from a very, very early age. And he used to bicycle to the local hospital and hang out with a very wonderful doctor called Dr. Jessica Mann, who was a childhood friend. And they would talk about medicine, and he would plan his great career in medicine. And then life happened. He ended up living in Spain and becoming an internet entrepreneur, completely different than anything he'd ever imagined doing. But he learned about the power of the internet and creating internet platforms. And so many years later, he met with the same doctor, Jessica Mann, and they were talking about what he should do next. And, sort of always in the back of his mind, he wanted to do something in medicine. And Jessica said she had become an eminent cardiologist and also worked developing some very meaningful and significant heart disease drugs. And so she said, Pablo, the biggest problem I have is connecting with patients for medical research. And he said, well, explain this to me. And so she explained the problem. And so Pablo put on his internet hat and said, we've solved this problem for shopping. We've solved this problem for buying airline tickets. We need to do the same for trials. We need to find a way that we can bring all the information together. So right now you can look for trials on ct.gov, you can look for trials on the World Health Organization. There are various repositories of clinical trial information. How do we aggregate that information? How do we really make it accessible? How do we make it so that when patients search for clinical trials, they understand the trial results? So that's how the whole thing started. And he thought, I think I know how to solve that problem. And that was in 2008. So we've been at it since then. And my personal journey to get to TrialReach was I have a background in technology and filmmaking, not in health, although it's something I've always been interested in. And then a friend of mine had a very bad stroke. And I ended up liaising with his medical team and with researchers about his stroke. And it reminded me of how much I love medicine. I'm interested in medicine. And I thought, if I have a 20-year career in technology in Silicon Valley, if I can put my sort of knowledge of technology together with my interest in medicine, what does that look like? And I went on LinkedIn and I found this company, TrialReach, a mile from my house in Richmond, England, which is where I'm right now. And that's where I met Pablo. And I knew he was really onto something really meaningful. I didn't understand the extent of it at the time. It's only since then that I, in talking extensively to patients and governments and medical researchers, that I understand the significance of the problem and how difficult it is for patients to find trials. But I can honestly say that every day of the last 3 years has been a total joy. I wake up in the morning with such wind in my sails, and it forced, all the conversations I have, that we are on the threshold of so much in terms of so many new developments in terms of medical science, and it doesn't happen without all of us. So anyway, that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but that's the answer to the question.
Not long-winded at all. It's a wonderful story about how you guys came together. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe elaborate some more, or what you've learned since joining around the difficulty that doctors like Dr. Mann and companies have filling their clinical trials? So, and maybe we can even kind of dip our toes into the important role that clinical trials play in creating new medicines or new therapies for patients like us.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think we should banish the word clinical trial. I think they're the worst two words in the English language. They're so off-putting, and they don't reflect the meaning of the work that's happening. But I think there is, first of all, there are no new medicines, no hope of cures without medical research. Everything happens because patients like you or me take part in clinical trials and test the efficacy, the effectiveness of new drugs and treatments. And I'm continually moved and humbled by the stories of those people who do this work and take part, both in terms of, it's not just, I love hearing the stories of patients and of the researchers. There's so many stories. I mean, in the diabetes community, the doctor at Harvard who's been doing the stem cell research, who was who really began that work because his son had diabetes, or the team that's developing the artificial pancreas. To me, they're unsung heroes, and equally, all the people who participate in the research, who understand the importance of taking part, none of these things happen without them. So we have got these two incredible communities, and yet they find it really difficult to find each other. And I think the statistics are really shocking. I'm very familiar with cancer trials in particular, and the NIH, for example, 50% of their trials don't find enough patients to be statistically significant. And on the other hand, 85% of cancer patients don't know about clinical trials. So, and yet if they do know about clinical trials, 69% of them say that they would want to participate. So there's a huge information gap between patients and the doctors doing the research. And I think that's our mission, is to bring those two communities together and share that, make that information flow so that patients really understand their options, really can evaluate all the things that are happening and if they want to take part. And similarly, researchers get the opportunity to share the information about their trials, whether it's a large pharmaceutical company or whether it's a small team in Sweden who have a very promising treatment. We want to democratize that process and bring all that information in one place. And as I said, it's happened in airlines, it's happened in shopping. Now we need to make it happen in medicine. I think I have a child coming into my kitchen. But anyway, so I think that's the importance of it. It doesn't happen without us. And yet, so few of us really know or understand what that means, or can understand what our options might be. So that's what we're setting out to do.
Where do you think that that disconnect comes from? Maybe talk a little bit about what you've seen and learned, and how you are addressing that.
I think there's a few different things. I think, as I mentioned before, I think the information is in many different places, so there isn't one place to go and look. There is stuff, but if you've ever tried looking on that, and I do frequently, even now, I'll be reference checking something, or just for my own interest, I'll be just doing a check comparing that site to our site. And for example, if you search for breast cancer trials in San Francisco, you'll get 69 trials. And I'm not a medical professional. I've been doing this for 3 years, and I'm somewhat familiar with the terminology now, but it's still impossible to understand. So you get 69 trial results. Even the titles alone, the full 5-sentence titles, I don't understand them. And then you have to sort of dig down and say, okay, so the 69 trials, and then if I want to try and figure out which one I can take part in, I have to understand and read all the inclusion-exclusion criteria for every single trial. And it's essentially impossible. And even if you're an oncologist, unless you have a week to sit down and go through all of those trials. So it's sort of like when you used to look for cars and apartments in newspapers, and you'd be looking at, let's say, in the New York Times, and you'd be reading pages and pages of apartment listings to try and find the one that has the 2 bedrooms and allows dogs and has a view, for example. Um, None of that information was digitized, but of course it's all online now. But that has not happened in clinical trials. It's all in what we call free text, which is essentially like a photocopy on the internet, no way to meaningfully search it, and certainly not to match against it. So we had this crazy notion, and it is slightly crazy, that you could take all of this data, make it machine readable, searchable, so that really for the first time, patients would have access to all of the information and be able to search it, be able to match it with the specifics of their condition, their blood glucose levels, and the treatments that they're having, not just where are you when you have diabetes, but a whole series of questions that are generated out of the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and that mean instead of looking at 69 trials, you're looking at 10 that you can potentially take part in near you. So there's a data piece of it that we're tackling, and then there's a distribution piece of it, and that gets to the heart of patients not understanding their clinical trial options. So how do we generate awareness? And what we do is we partner with blogs and charities and patient sites like yours, so that patients are aware of their options. I mean, I think that's if I have one message, it's you should know your options. You shouldn't necessarily take part in a clinical trial, but you should at least be aware of them and what's happening in terms of medical research, what's promising, what's interesting, and what does it mean if you want to take part.
Yeah, there's another key piece that I've observed, and I think there's a layer that you're not maybe quite giving enough credit to the talented folks in your organization and that's the between the data that you're collecting, and as you talked a little bit about the very medical terms and language that's used, you guys do something with that language to make it much more understandable. You're almost translating it or reducing the reading level a bit or a lot in many cases, right?
Well, that's absolutely the goal. So we've developed a free tool called Bridge that we provide for free to any medical researcher, and essentially they can add information to their trials, the kind of information that patients tell us they want. It's incredible, really, that so little thought is given to, there's these incredibly scientific protocols, but people haven't thought about the fact that patients work. So patients want to know things like, can I go on a Saturday? Is there parking? Is there a crash? Do I get reimbursed for expenses? What does it mean when they list X procedure? What does that actually mean? And do I have to have overnight stays? So you said the human phase of clinical trials. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to talk to as many patients as we can, and we do, to find out what's really important to them. And then we create this tool and ask those questions to the researchers, and then the researchers give us the information that patients say they want. So I think that's a really, really important part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think it's critical to be able to ask those kind of questions, and I bet that once they see that the researchers, it's kind of like, oh, of course, why, of course I should include that type of information. But I do the same thing with many different projects that I'm working on, where I'm so close to the information that I can't think of the outer circles that are helpful.
But it gets to something else that I think is really important, and I think it's not, we're just scratching the surface in a way, with this basic information that patients say they want to know and is important. But really, I think what we're really trying to do is shift the balance so that patients truly are at the center of clinical trials and medical research. And it's not just about things like where you can, if you can park, or can you come to the trial site on Saturdays. It's what are the things you care about. So there's researchers over here developing their drugs and treatments, and they think they know what you care about. But we work very closely with Dave de Bronkart, who was one of the founders of the patient empowerment movement, and he's been working extensively with the Parkinson's community. And it's been fascinating. Essentially, they've been creating a model around which patients are at the center of the process of medical research. And very, very often, the things that they want drugs to be developed for are not the same things that the researchers are developing drugs for. Because the things that are important to them, whether it be a shake or mobility or incontinence, or, there's things that are super important to them, but don't, for whatever reason, don't register with the researchers. So I think that work is really, really important. And I'm curious, actually, in terms of diabetes, what are the things that, what are the treatments and the research being done that you think is most promising in terms of its potential impact on your life? And is there a gap? Are there things that you think, I would love something that helps me with this that no one's addressing?
Well, I'm going to ask our community folks to pipe in with some thoughts or questions around that, and while I give them some opportunities some time to type and answer that, I'll share just a few thoughts that I have. And again, I think we have a few different, many different flavors of people living with diabetes, right? So I look at myself, and I'm someone who lives with type 1 diabetes, which almost automatically implies that I'm using an intense insulin regimen to manage myself. And I'm also I'm an early adopter of technology and gadgets, and I like all that stuff. So with that in mind, I'm very interested in a lot of the artificial pancreas research that's happening. And so that often combines some form of continuous glucose monitoring and insulin pump, and those two communicating back and forth, usually with some sort of smart computer algorithm in the middle, to make frequent adjustments. And I like the idea of that frequent monitoring and frequent adjusting, because if I think in my head about the way that a layperson thinks of a normal non-diabetic pancreas, it's measuring blood sugars more often than once a second. And when it detects a blood sugar that's out of its normal bounds, it's making little minute adjustments either up or down. And I think that's much the same way an artificial pancreas tries to work. The difference, of course, is that we're delivering insulin into the subcutaneous tissue as opposed to right into the bloodstream. So there's still many differences and challenges and so forth, but I'm very excited about that.
Are you following the artificial pancreas research, and have you applied to be on that trial? I know they were looking for 260 people this year to work on that project.
I'm following. So there's actually a handful of groups of people, different groups working on different flavors of the artificial pancreas, and I did send an email to the folks that are one of the research centers here in the Minnesota area at the Mayo Clinic. And actually, I was just at a conference, and while I was away, received a packet of information to fill out. So I'm in the process of seeing if I qualify. And it's when you do the study enrollments, or there's a process involved. It's not as easy as just walking in a door, and there's criteria.
That's exciting. That's really exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Keep us posted. I'm curious to know how that goes.
Absolutely. I'm a fan of participating in research when and where I can. Two examples that come to mind for me personally. One is there was a product that just was recently purchased by Eli Lilly, and that was the intranasal glucagon. So glucagon is a drug that we use, or is used on us rather, when our blood sugars go very low, and it's a rescue drug to boost our blood sugars back up. And the form that it exists in today is a shot, and a very smart company came up with a powder that's intranasal, and I had an opportunity to do a couple of trials on that, and just a wonderful experience. And now seeing that this product has been acquired and is moving, there's a whole process that happens once it's acquired that we don't often see what happens at those stages, but being a part of something that is moving forward it feels good, exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And have you tried the nasal insulin?
No, we did though have a live interview from someone that had used the Afrezza, the inhalable insulin, and that was really an interesting story.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how that is to use.
Yeah, me too. It sounds really interesting, and I think is a great option for some people. It's very new, and like many things, as you know, time will tell, and it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about what you learn? You talked about learning from participants what they want developed, but can you talk a little bit about the data that you're gathering and how it can help either design studies or help with that enrollment process? It sounds so sad when I think about studies that can't complete because they can't find enough people.
Yeah, and again, I'm just referring, my experience with, I was talking with the Cancer Research Institute in New York, and they're sort of the leading funder of immunotherapy trials for cancer, which are some of the most promising trials for cancer. And, they were talking about how difficult it is to find patients, and yet, that patients are dying, literally dying, of the diseases that they're developing the treatments for. So, it never fails to amaze me that that they can't find the patients. But so in terms of the data, the product that we've created, or one of the things we've created is, as I said, we've broken down the problem, but one of them is helping patients find the trials that they can take part in without having to read 69 trials, which is impossible. So we've broken down that data. And what we do is we ask questions out of the trial inclusion-exclusion criteria. It happens automatically. So we ask the questions in the order of which the number of trials will be reduced. So you'll ask a question about your blood sugar levels, and then instead of seeing 69 trials, you'll see 20, for example. And when we ask you those questions, we save that data. We don't save it as personal data. We don't save it as data. We don't know it's you, Scott. But we aggregate that data, and that tells us a lot about what patients, the specifics of patients, their condition, and also, where they are. And that's going to help. That helps people designing research in many, many ways. It helps understand the population, particularly in things like with, it's rare that people suffer from one condition. There's usually other complications, and especially with diabetes. So, that's one of the areas where we really can help, because we can help a researcher understand that, they can design a trial for this population, but actually the population looks like this, and often has this incidence of another disease, for example, another complication. So nobody's done anything like that. And it's one of the reasons why we say is, if you want to explore and understand your clinical trial options, taking part in a clinical trial in a way is the last step. There's a journey, and it can start with just answering some questions about your health, and then those questions can be used along with the answers of every other patient that's taken part to design the research, find the sites, and tailor those protocols. So they're designing the protocols for the real population, not some population that they imagine in their head. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. because it's life doesn't happen in a laboratory, right?
Yeah, yeah. My husband just came in. I want to hang out, the Google Hangout with thousands of people.
That's wonderful. I love it. We are approaching the end of our time, and I would love to ask for people who are interested in learning more about TrialReach, and is this something that they can participate from around the world, or is it country specific, or and if are there things they can do to support TrialReach, or tell us a little bit more about some of those types of things?
Yeah, well, I would say join the movement. TrialReach is just a small piece of the story. We are privileged every day to come in contact with communities like yours, Scott. So let's spread the word about the importance of research. Let's help people find out about their options. And absolutely, although we're very focused on the US right now, we also have been working with the World Health Organization to get access to their database. So ultimately, we want to do this on a global scale. But it's really about getting the information out there. It's about learning about what research is interesting and making sure that patients know that clinical trials are an option, and also trying to demystify and debunk, the myths about clinical trials. Because in reality, they're happening at Mayo Clinic, right? They're happening at Sloan Kettering. They're happening at these incredible institutions with these extraordinary people who've devoted their life to doing this research. We never hear about them. We never hear about their stories. We never hear about the guy in Boston who's doing this stem cell work for diabetes, who spent his life doing this because his son has type 1 diabetes. Those are the stories that inspire me. And so I think let's share those stories. And if, engage with us on Twitter. We're on Twitter. So if you have any ideas, if there are things you need, please reach out. I mean, we have incredible teams of people that, will go to the ends of the earth, literally, if you have a question or a need. I can't tell you, we have an extraordinary, I will name Jolene and Yvonne in particular, because they're on the front lines every day talking to patients and go to extraordinary lengths to find not just trials. I mean, often we find patients who are in, really bad state, who just want to understand. Maybe they want a second opinion, or maybe they want to understand who the best doctor is for breast cancer, and they're in Vancouver. And, that is such a privilege to be able to have that network and to be able to say, we know who you can go to, and just to offer them that information that it means so much and can mean so much. So I think what you're doing is extraordinary. I think your community is extraordinary, and, we're so happy to be a part of it. And if we can help in any way, anybody who's listening, just reach out. As I said, Twitter's a great way to reach us, or my email is very easy. It's sarah@trialreach.com, and we have a great team standing by to hear what you need, hear what's important to you in terms of clinical research, and help you connect if you do want to make those connections and take part in research.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your evening with us and joining us all from London. It's very, very generous of you and your family for loaning us time tonight. So thank you, all of you. And thank you everyone there at 2 Diabetes for joining us and tuning in, and we'll see you next time.